Right, good evening, everybody. Just as we get used to the old technology, they thrust some new stuff on us. So if you could bear with us, well, I think we'll probably all be bearing with each other this evening until we get the hang of it. So, but thank you, everybody, for attending this meeting of the Council on Tuesday, the 18th of May, 2021. My name is Steve Holgate, and I am the Mayor. Councillor Julia Berry is the Deputy Mayor. For the first time in a long time, we are all here in the Lancastrian together, and the meeting is being streamed live on YouTube for the first time. When using the microphones, please tap on the button. It will flash green. When using the microphones, please wait for them to turn red before you begin to speak. You may stand if you so wish. If you do not have a microphone but wish to speak, please make your way to the microphone table at the entrance to the room. That's the back entrance there, or the front if you prefer. Please can all members respect the COVID measures in place? They are there for everyone's safety. Please ensure your mobile phones are switched off. When we are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarms sound, please exit the way you came in. Before we start usual proceedings, I'm sure you will all have been saddened to learn of the death of Elizabeth Raby, known to us in this chamber as Margaret, actually, but obviously Elizabeth Margaret Raby, a former councillor and Mayor of Chorley in 1977 to 78, who sadly passed away on May the 7th. We will now observe a minute's silence, if you please. Ruth, could you indicate when that silence is up? Thank you. There we go. First faux pas. Didn't switch my mic on. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Adrian Lowe and Councillor Tommy Gray. Are there anybody else wishing to submit apologies on behalf of anyone not here tonight? Take that as a no. Okay, we move on to item 1, which the minutes of the meeting Tuesday the 13th of April 2021 of the Council. Those minutes are on your agenda papers, pages 3 to 6. This item is for a decision and it is to be proposed by Councillor Bradley and seconded by Councillor Wilson.
Can I propose that those minutes are taken as a true and correct record of that meeting of the 13th of April? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Is there anyone opposed to those minutes being approved? Right. The decision is that the The minutes of the meeting have been approved. Item 2 is declarations of any interest. Do we have any of those?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a member of the Lancashire County Council, could I declare an interest in the notice of motion and reserve my right to speak in the debate?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I remind members of the responsibility to declare any pecuniary interests in respect of matters contained on the agenda? Councillor Riggott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to make the same declaration as Councillor Collins. That was all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you. Item 3, mayoral announcements. Usually at this meeting, we would appoint the mayor and deputy mayor for the year. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was agreed in November last year that my mayoral year would be extended to include the municipal year 2021-22. I would like to welcome Councillor Boardman as the new leader of the opposition. Welcome, Councillor Boardman. On behalf of members, please may I also welcome Louise Mattinson as the new Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer. I would like to thank James Thompson for standing in as Section 151 over the past 12 months and note he will now take up his substantive role as Deputy Section 151 Officer. Plans are being developed to hold a special council meeting to celebrate both retiring councillors and to welcome newly elected councillors. The proposed date for that is currently the 29th of June. So a little pomp and ceremony to look forward to there. First of all, I would like to look backwards, then we can look forwards. Looking back, I think it is important that we recall those councillors that have served the community of Chorley and its villages over the years, some of whom one might say have served almost a lifetime. Some have stepped down, others may not have been with us due to recent elections, and I won't elaborate or go into detail, as I am sure others will do that, and not necessarily this evening. Once, whilst I was having a moan about a councillor in the past, a long-standing and experienced officer of the council made the point that he was unaware of any councillor who had ever joined the council with any purpose other than to serve to the best of their ability and with good intentions. That comment has always stuck with me and reminded me that despite our many differences and approaches and differing views, holding public office is an honourable thing to do, for which there is little reward other than having the knowledge that our community is a little better for our efforts. And for that reason alone, we should afford each other respect. That is how I hope to run these meetings and how I will approach everyone, irrespective of whether I agree with you or not. You will be afforded respect and the opportunity to express your views and to have your say. Likewise, irrespective of whether you like me or hate me, I will expect you all to respect the office of Mayor, not necessarily me. You can tell me how ruddy awful I am after the meeting is closed, if you so wish. Next week, due to the easing of lockdown restrictions, I will be able to walk around the town centre talking to traders, shopkeepers and those working in hospitality venues to support them in their drive to recreate the town centre vitality we all love and crave to return. You're relieved to know I'm nearly done. Tomorrow, my Mayoress Emma and I will join Hasina Khan at an event to promote dementia awareness, which is being hosted at the Chorley Methodist Church, Gillibrand Walks. Tea and cakes will be provided outside, I'm told. That's the diet gone. The Mayor's inaugural event will be held on the evening of the 16th of July, subject to the easing of restrictions, and will take the form of a performance by Chorley's Sing It Big Choir, a luxury buffet, speeches, brackets short, and dancing. My charities this year will be St Catherine's Hospice, Chorley Inspire Youth Zone, and Chorley in Bloom. That's the end of my comments. Item 4, Returning Officer's Report. To receive the report of the Returning Officer, this item is for noting, but could the Chief Executive and Returning Officer Gary Hall present his report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I have pleasure in presenting the report. It's a short report that outlines the results of the recent elections. Just by way of thanks, my thanks to all for the conduct of the elections. Quite difficult given the circumstances, but I thought we all performed very well in terms of the elections. So thank you for your perseverance with us on the nights, plural. Thank you very much. The report's for noting.
Thank you very much, Gary. The report will be proposed by Councillor Bradley and seconded by Councillor Wilson, and then we will debate. Councillor Bradley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try and stand up and speak because it's very rude sitting down and speaking, so hopefully you can all hear me through this device. I'll try to look at the device and look at yourselves. But I can't look at Mr. Mayor and yourselves because it goes off. So I will not look at you, Mr. Mayor, but I'm thinking about you. You'll be glad to know. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for Gary's comments as well. I think we need to recognise the tremendous efforts of our officers in getting this election delivered. The first council in Lancashire to report its results, and that was after a long night of verification, which I'm sure those of us who attended it were very tired afterwards, and certainly by the end of the counting, I'm sure everybody who worked on that count was very, very tired. So thank you to all the officers and staff who worked on that count, particularly to Catherine in her first full election without the helping hand of the former elections officer. She did an excellent job. It was a very complicated job to do, and I think we did it really well. And also a thanks to the returning officer who, despite being the master of the big reveal with his piece of paper going round the circle, showing people numbers, actually, I believe, did do some useful things on that day as well, and on those days as well. So well done, Gary. I am delighted, on behalf of the Labour Group, to welcome some new, young and enthusiastic councillors. Our new councillors, Sarah Ainsworth, Terry Howarth, Karen Derbyshire, Samir Khan, James Nevitt, Jenny Whiffin and Jean Sherwood, I'm sure, will add to our group. They will certainly be making their presence felt in the council chamber when we get back in there, and in the meantime on the committees that they've been appointed to. And I'm also glad, among some of the old names who've appeared back on the Conservative ranks, to see some younger presence as well, which I'm sure will invigorate the group opposite. So a refreshed council, a new council. And I think what we saw, Mr. Mayor, at that election was an endorsement of Chorley Labour policies. We saw a different result in Chorley than we saw nationally. We saw an endorsement of what we've done in this town and borough over the last 9 years. We bucked the trend, I think was the phrase used by the radio journalist who interviewed me that afternoon. And how did we do that, Mr. Mayor? We did it by doing the things that the public of Chorley want. And therefore, in a new council, a reduced council, we've maintained our majority, we maintained our share of the vote, and we were given a ringing endorsement by the residents of Chorley. And, Mr. Mayor, to deal with one of the myths that emerged through the election campaign, and it's been a myth for a number of years, this idea that Chorley Labour ignore the rural areas, I point to the councillors on my own side who represent areas such as Brindle, Brinscull, Rivington, Heskin and Kewarden, not exactly the urban heart of Chorley Borough. So I think we need to shoot that fox once and for all and move on and have a proper discussion about how we do what's best for all the residents of Chorley. Mr. Returning Officer and Mr. Mayor, we had a very good election in terms of its conduct. And as far as this side of the room is concerned, and that little bit of that side of the room as well that's also red, we also had a very good result. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wilson, do you wish to second and speak to this?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor. I don't think I need to speak at any length. Councillor Bradley has covered all the main points and referenced the endorsement that we received once again from the public of Chorley in this round of elections. But I just would like to thank again our officers. It was a particularly difficult election. Difficult because we had 3 elections on one day. Difficult because we only knew it was going to happen at the end of February and they didn't have the running time. And as Councillor Bradley said, we had Catherine there who was on her own, as it were, heading up the team. But also we had some very, very experienced officers working with her. And I would like to congratulate them on what I thought was an excellent, well-run election.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. The report is for noting, but I will invite anyone else who wishes to comment or speak to do so now. That's the board. The information about who wishes to speak doesn't come to me, so...
I think my green light's on. I'm not sure. Yes, I'd also like to second Councillor Bradley's comments and welcome all councillors to to Lancastrian, not the Chamber, this evening. It's really nice to see that we've got 27 returning councillors that were very successful in their seats. We've got 11 brand new councillors that are into the council this time, which is really exciting to see. I'd just like to welcome each one of those by name. We've got Sarah Ainsworth, Sam Chapman, Councillor Karen Derbyshire, Terry Howarth, Samir Khan, James Nevitt, Andy Riggett, Jean Sherwood, Christine Turner and Jenny Riffin. I'd also like to welcome William Simmons, who at 19 is our youngest ever councillor on Chorley Borough Council. I think he's just usurped Councillor France by 1 year from the research. So that's +1 this year anyway, so far. So thank you very much again for that. So the quick welcome. Just a quick word to all the new councillors. Basically, you've all got a responsibility to the residents of your ward that you represent. It's an important responsibility. And don't be afraid to speak up in the chamber or in these meetings. That's what they're here for. You know, Chorley councillors need a strong voice. You might be new within the chamber, but your voice is equally as important as everybody else and those that have served for 30, 40 years. So don't be frightened and please do speak up. I'd also like to just compliment Councillor Bradley on his comments. He stole my words because at the count I said to Councillor Bradley that Labour are bucking the trend yet again in Chorley. However, it's nice to see that the margin is coming down. It might be slow, but we're creeping there. And to go from 7 councillors sitting here last year to 13 this year, I think we've done very well, and I applaud all of us who put the effort in. And I look forward to a really exciting year ahead. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wish to comment? If not, I will just add my sentiments to those already expressed and point out that if anybody is thinking of doing a maiden speech, and I jest not, it's sometimes quite a daunting thing to speak for the first time in a different environment. And some people may be used to it and it's just like breathing in and out. But if anyone has any issues or wishes to speak about how they are best able to make that first speech and demonstrate their concerns and passions and interests to the rest of us, then please don't hesitate to get in touch and we'll set a slot on one side for you. Thank you. As I say, that's for noting, so we'll take that as noted if that's with everybody's consent. Item 5 is the appointment of the executive leader of the council, if required, and I think that's already been established and done. Am I correct there? Right. Okay. So that's for noting as well. Item 6 is the executive cabinet appointments for 2021-22. They're on your agenda pages 33 and 34. and is to receive the report from the Executive Leader, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In terms of a general introduction to these next several reports, which are around executive positions and committee positions, etc., I think it's important that we highlight our priority as a group and as an administration this year, which is obviously to build back from the pandemic that we've all suffered for the last year and a half almost now, and look to get Chorley back on its feet. That is the first priority of this council. That has been the priority of this council, getting us through this pandemic. Hopefully, and touch wood, we are coming out of it, and the local blips around the Indian variant, or whatever it's called, are only temporary. So our first priority is about building back. Alongside that, we need to take recognition of the increasing amount of work we're doing through a shared agenda with South Ribble, also the changed political circumstances and leadership of County Council, which I believe has to and will create more joint working across Lancashire. To do anything else, after we've worked so well through the pandemic, would be foolish and would be a retrograde step. So I, for one, will be urging closer working across Lancashire. We also have a whole tranche of new directors, many of whom are shared directors of services, who haven't properly bedded in, who we haven't properly got to know, because we have been under lockdown and therefore not able to meet and get to know people quite as much as we have in the past. And therefore, Mr Mayor, the proposals that we've done have been about two things: about change and preparing us for this coming time, but also about a level of continuity. We've just gone through a major upheaval. I do not see the benefit at the moment of adding yet more upheaval and change massively to that. In a year's time, we can maybe look back and see where we're at and then look to make some more substantive changes. So at the moment, you'll notice that the executive positions are effectively many of the same from last time. The notable addition of Councillor Peter Gabbert to the Cabinet in place of Graham Dunn, a hard act to follow. I believe he's been taking Latin lessons of an evening class and has been honing his put-downs in the mirror, so we'll see where that comes down the line. In terms of the lead members, we're looking for a bit of a change around on a couple of those positions, with Councillor Margaret Franz and Alex Hilton sharing some of the roles around health and integrated working and shared services, and Hasina Khan maintaining the work she's done very well on equalities previously. At a time of trouble like we've had through this pandemic, it's very easy for society to splinter, for communities to retreat back into their own little worlds. In Chorley, we've generally avoided that, and I hope we can build back with an even more cohesive and integrated community who will do what's best for Chorley. We have every confidence in that, and I think the people of Chorley are looking forward to that opportunity to come back together and start working more together again. The members responsible and the council champions are listed there. They signify our priorities for the coming year, and therefore, Mr Mayor, I commend the proposals to the council and hope that everyone can support them. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wilson, I invite you to second the proposals.
Seconded, Mr Mayor, and just to again welcome Councillor Gabbert to the Cabinet. I'm sure he'll be an excellent addition to the team, and as Councillor Bradley said, help us continue to do the work we're doing to make sure we deliver on behalf of our local residents. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak before we note the report? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on. Item 7. Appointment to committees, panels and working groups for 2021-22. They're on pages 35 to 48 of your agenda. Councillor Bradley, it's you again.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just before I move on from the previous item, Mr Mayor, I want to make one plea to the officers. Councillor Morwood and the people in our planning portfolios like the word planning, not development control. So where it says development control at the top, we're going to change that word to planning, and we are all, including myself, going to try to use the word planning more and development control less. We don't control development, we plan for Chorley. On that note, Mr Mayor, going back to the substantive point of this part of the meeting, the committee panels and working groups, they're all detailed there. I think we have filled most of the slots we have to fill. There are only 2 groups now in Chorley, so we have to do it between us. I am sure people will change as the year goes on, but I am trusting that both groups have fully consulted, made sure everybody's happy with what they're doing, and those members of my group who are unhappy with what they're doing will get on with it with the best of endeavours in the meantime. Well, I'm sure we'll change them in due course when they get too fed up with the different jobs they've been given. But I hope that all members take the opportunity they've been given to get involved. There'll be more opportunities as the year goes on as we develop scrutiny groups, as we develop other working groups, and there is a lot to do. We've had a year and a half almost of stasis. While we've got on with some of the projects, a lot of the things this council wanted to do has been put on hold because we've been focused on fighting COVID. We now can get back to it, hopefully, with a vengeance, and therefore it will need lots of hands to make it work. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I propose that report.
Councillor Wilson.
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
I invite anyone to speak. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask a question before I ask my main question? The question is that we've heard that possibly one of the committees is going to be changing its timings.
I suggest you you either shout louder or sit down and speak.
Is the licensing committee going to be changed its timings before I ask my proper question?
Yes, carry on, Councillor Bradley. Answer that.
Councillor Platt, as I think you're probably aware, to change the time of committee meetings. My own view and the view of our group is that council meetings and committee meetings happen when members want them to happen, and that's usually defined by the chair of that committee. And my own view is they should be as flexible as possible. So evenings, daytime, early in the morning, whatever works for the members works for us. It's about doing business. And therefore, in a time when increasingly people are working flexibly, my own personal view is that meetings should be at all available times, and it's up to the chair and the members of committees to agree alongside the officers and the chief executive what time those meetings take place. For me, they will be at different times to allow different people to attend who may have responsibilities and commitments elsewhere at those times. So some in the daytime, some in the evening. That's my position, Mr. Mayor, up to the chairs of the committees.
Thank you. You want to come back?
Mr. Mayor, may I request your consideration regarding the decision on the membership of the Licensing Committee on this report and I'll explain. Since the calendar of meetings was published by officers and the induction of many new members, many more than in a normal year, and the meeting of our group, it has been presented to us by one of the Labour group members that he will be changing the times of this committee meeting. Whilst this may seem a good idea to suit the convenience of one individual's diary, I wonder whether the additional evening staffing implications for officers and attendance has been considered. I wonder whether it has been considered that the calendar has already been published, arrangements made and new councillors inducted on the makeup of the committees and their timings, and also that the proposed members on this report have been chosen for this committee on the current timings of the meetings, or whether the cost implications being explored in changing these long-standing arrangements after the fact and adding the burden of another meeting, evening meeting, to a number of officers, evening working hours and external attending persons. Now, I'm not sure if the Labour group knew about this change before, or even as late as at your group meeting, and were able to set your committees accordingly. But as elected members, that's us, the same as yourselves, we were unaware of even the thought of the possibility even until it was presented as a fait accompli by an email on the 16th of May at 7:39, which was after our group meeting and after many of the new councillors were inducted, the inductions of the newly elected members had taken place, and with no discussion, warning or consultation. So to summarise, may I propose to have the decision to change the licensing committee to an evening meeting be fully reviewed and costed in time, staffing and monetary terms so it can be fully realised and the consequence of a change suggested by one individual at this late hour. Given this, I would also propose, seeing as this decision to set the membership of the Licence Committee is based on the premise of the timings of the meetings being as they have been set already, and not based on the knowledge of the timings being changed, that any implication date of research changes should be after May 22 to avoid additional work for officers in this council year. Confusion for new councillors who have already been inducted, but also to avoid the committee membership list having to come back to the next meeting with a different set of members who can make the new meeting times. Just a parting thought, it was written in the previously mentioned email announcing to our group that licensing would be changing to evening meetings, that it was so a wider pool of members could attend. So it begs the question why, if there is such a wider pool of members, why would any individual be chosen who could not commit to the Licence Committee's set timetable, Mr Mayor? Thank you.
Sorry, do you wish to respond to that, Councillor Bradley?
Respond, Mr Mayor, and just say what I said earlier. It's down to committee chairs to set the times of those meetings. There's a calendar published of dates for meetings. I don't think we particularly detailed times. They say what times they are typically at, but it's the right of any chair to change the times of those meetings to whichever time suits that committee. As I said, personally, I'd rather be as flexible as possible, and as I understand it, these proposals have been mooted previously. As I understand it, the idea is to have a mixture of daytime and evening meetings, and therefore that gives wider opportunity for members to attend. It's not our place to set the times for individual committees to take place. In terms of cost, the officers are here to work at the convenience of councillors, and therefore, if they work in the evenings, they get time off in lieu and all the rest of it. So I don't think there's any extra cost from that. So I'm a bit at a loss, Mr Mayor. I suppose this is a symptom a little bit of the COVID situation. If it's not been discussed more widely, it should maybe have gone through member working group or what have you. But like I said, I respect the right of chairs to set the time of their meetings. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Platt, do you want to come back?
I agree with you, Councillor Bradley. It's not been discussed. We've never heard of it before. It's not been through anything before. We've never heard of it. We've set our committees on the premise that they were all in the afternoons, and so a different set of members could take part, rather than the evening with people who take part in different meetings. So it may well be the case that all the committee membership may come back to the next meeting. Now, I know that's not, maybe you're not particularly bothered about that, but it's upsetting the apple cart after the event. I mean, if we'd had heard about it before, then we could have maybe set a different set of people. Thanks.
Councillor Bradley, we're getting into a bit of an impasse here, so is there anyone else wish to speak beside Councillor Platt on this issue?
Councillor Boardman's indicating what's to say.
Councillor Boardman, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, just to reinforce what Councillor Platt was stating, Sunday evening I received an email from the chair of the Licensing Committee. It came to me, it didn't come to the group. And basically, I responded. I didn't see the email until Monday, but I responded to the chair this morning with a very brief email, and quite polite and courteous. And it was just around the situation and just explaining our situation from our group. In the email I put, as you are no doubt aware, councillors have other commitments to other outside bodies. Many are trustees of outside bodies and many school governors. Juggling these other commitments with their council duties and commitments can be difficult, and we welcome that. As a group, which is a significantly smaller group than that in administration, we have never had an issue finding councillors to sit on a full and sub-meetings during the day for licensing. We don't have many day commitments or meetings at this council. However, these day meetings suit some members better than others. There's also a practicality issue. Some of the meetings take up 3 hours to complete an investigation. Last Thursday's subcommittee meeting, which I believe started at 2 p.m, finished at 5. Now, if that's held in the evening, this would mean our officers, including police and solicitors, appearing to prosecute and defend, working till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which we feel is not acceptable. They have all probably come to that meeting after a full day's work and are probably pretty tired. I did respond and said we can't support the recommendation. We'd like it to be heard in the full council meeting next time before this date is the time is changed. We've all been given our lovely little diaries today, and unfortunately, Councillor Bradley, yes, it does say 2 p.m. on all the licensing subcommittees and full committees on the Wednesdays and all the way through. So we as a group believe that the change shouldn't happen, and our proposal is that we just wait till the next full council meeting when the officers had time to look at the ramifications involved and we can actually vote on it. Thank you. For the second that, please.
Councillor Bradley, I'm going to come back to that proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having not been involved in these discussions whatsoever, I'm happy to defer to the chair of that committee to explain the reasoning for it. But I come back to, you can't set an agenda, a diary a year ahead when you don't even know the people who are going to be on the council. So there is an outline there which is to be clarified and committed to. At the end of the day, the idea is to get as many people involved as possible. If you set all these meetings in the daytime, that is excluding a large lump of this council, so that's ridiculous to try and do that. What you've got to have is flexible meetings, and as I understand it, the proposal is to have some meetings during the day and some meetings during the evening. We have substitutes, although I've now noticed that I think Councillor Ridden's on twice as a member and as a substitute, so you're doing well there, Keith, to be on twice. But if members can't do it, that's the whole point of the substitute system. That's the point we're getting to. I don't know who's been involved in these discussions. It's certainly not my job to organise the timing of every committee in this council. There are far better minds than mine to do that. So I suggest they should have been doing it. If they haven't, it's still the chair's right to call the meetings at whatever time they see fit, alongside the vice chairs and the committee members.
Councillor Lynch, do you want to elaborate?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, Chair, can I thank officers for the hard work and diligence through the COVID pandemic. These have been extremely difficult times for licensed premises holders and also the taxi trade. Last year, we did have the discussion about moving the licensing times. At that stage, I left it open to members to decide. Members decided they wanted to keep it the way that it always has been. Problem with that, Chair, is we found, particularly during hearings, we were getting a very small pool of members that were able to attend. And what I want to see as Chair is quite a diverse and inclusive committee, certainly not an exclusive membership. The other issue is members that would have liked to attend that committee have not been able to, as Councillor Bradley has pointed out, due to work commitments. I think the suggestion is that this change is due to my diary. Can I say to people, I work nights. This makes my life even worse. So to suggest that it's purely for me is absolute nonsense. What we are trying to do is give a greater flexibility for members that wish to join the committee and wish to give 100% attendance or effort to that committee. We want to give them that opportunity. What I don't want, and what I have seen in meetings, is councillors clock watching. Councillors saying, why are you asking these questions? It's going on too long. No good decisions will ever come from that. So what I need is people that are committed to the committee. This, I think, is the best way of doing it. Councillor Boardman refers to 3-hour meetings. Quite right. Any meeting which has such a serious nature as the one we dealt with last week, Chair's discretion will be in place. And that meeting will happen during the day. But if there are other meetings, general licensing or 2003 subcommittee meetings, that are not as serious as that, then there is no reason they can be held at night. So the full committee will be held at night to allow everybody to attend. If people are struggling to attend a meeting at 6:30 in the evening, I wonder how you've all got here today. because it is in line with other committee meetings. Finally, I have had no issues raised by the licensing team. I've had no issues raised by the leadership or the Labour membership that are proposed to go on. So, while I understand your point of view, I don't think there is a solid base to keep it as it is. What I want to see, again, and I repeat, is an inclusive committee, not an exclusive club. So my view is that the meetings will change. We will constantly monitor it, but that's my decision as chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. Councillor Platt, you've proposed that it remains the same. Do you wish to continue with that proposal and seek a seconder, or are you going to do as Councillor Lynch suggests and just monitor it as we go forward?
I will seek a seconder because I do think it's something council needs to consider as a full package, and also maybe not just on the hoof.
Yes, of course. Legal officer, I might have stepped out of line there, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, Mr Mayor, that if you look at what the report is about, it's about appointments to committees, panels and working groups. There are two recommendations about allocation of committee places in accordance with political balance rules and the appointment of members, chairs and vice chairs to that committee. It's not necessarily a recommendation of this report to set times of the meetings. In terms of the best time to hold licensing committee, I mean, obviously the chair has a major say in that. I would suggest that it's reviewed as and when you go along. Inevitably, some licensing committee meetings will have to be during the daytime. Certain panel meetings on a practical level may have to be, but that can be reviewed as we go along. But the fundamental point is, I think technically speaking, it's not actually relevant to the recommendations of the report.
Right, so that's an interesting concept. So in fact, the report is not recommending anything to do with the timing of the meeting, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right, okay. In that case, we've had this debate for no apparent reason whatsoever. Councillor Boardman, you come back, but then I'm wrapping it up because we're talking about the wrong thing at the wrong time. You can speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This is a democracy.
I have to say, I totally disagree. This is a full council meeting. Okay, we don't normally debate in this full council meeting, as you well know, Mr. Mayor. But on an item which the leader of the opposition receives an email on a Sunday evening and has no other opportunity to discuss this with the chair of the licensing committee or with his own group, or to actually change the timetable or members prior to this full council meeting. Yes, this is the right place to discuss and debate this, Mr. Mayor. And you might say it isn't, but all we have asked is for a proposal, and I'm seconding Deborah's proposal. I'm asking that the decision is delayed until all the ramifications have been put together. If you don't want to put that forward, that's fine. That's our recommendation.
Okay, well, the recommendation I'm getting from the legal officer, which I'm obliged to take, is that it is not an appropriate proposal for this particular item, and therefore I'm going to take it as it is. You can either vote for it as it is or against it. Councillor Bradley.
Mr. Mayor, just to try and help pour some oil on the troubled waters, whatever the phrase is, I am sure the chair of that committee is happy to meet with the leaders and deputy leader of our opposition group, convened by the chief executive or whoever else is the appropriate person, to have a discussion, to come up with a proposal that works as much as it possibly can work for everybody. That's the only proposal we can do because that's the only powers we've got. So we'll offer that. I'm sure looking at the chair of licensing, he will indulge that request because it has been short notice. That's regrettable, but what we'll try and do is spell out what the plan is for the next 3 to 6 months, and as members have pointed out, if we can monitor it as it's going along and change it as that's the case. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I think you're going to have to accept that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. That was similar to what I was thinking, but it wasn't my place to say so. So we will now move on to the vote. All those, because this is a decision. How do we do a vote on this? Show of hands. Right, show of hands. Those in favour of the recommendations 2 and 3 as on the paper, please show. Keep your hands up. Give Ruth time to count. I forgot to vote myself there. I will. Okay, put your hands down. Is there anyone against? It would seem after all that. NEMCOM. Let's throw a bit of Latin in there. Oh yeah, do we have an abstention? It was something I was going to mention after the meeting. We need to try and improve things a little. I noticed that with my microphone on, I can't hear as well as when it's off. So, Councillor Whittaker, do you want to move? Do you want to move to the spare desk? We're going to have to go back to the old-fashioned way with memoing like you used to do in the mills when you couldn't hear because of the racket of the weaving looms and that. Right, okay. Right. So that was unanimous. We'll move now on to item 8. Which is appointment to outside bodies. That's on your agenda item pages 49 to 52. Councillor Bradley.
I propose the outside bodies report as it is detailed to members. I think the efforts of those members who have served previously on most of these bodies is appreciated, and I hope that those members who have been put forward by their groups or are carrying on in the roles can carry on doing those jobs, particularly as a number of these organisations have, if you like, been suspended while COVID has been going on. So we need, again, to see those groups starting to re-emerge and start to engage with them fully. So I propose a report, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor, and I do hope that none of the outside bodies have changed the times of the meeting.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Can we agree that? Councillor Riggott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wondered if you, the appropriate officer, could give us some advice on whether it's good practice for a member to admit they can't hear but are voting but refuse a change of chair, because I don't think that reflects well on the people of Chorley, especially when we're broadcasting this live. Thank you.
Did anyone hear that? Who wants to respond to Councillor Riggott?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I think it would be sensible if the member in question could. There's a spare desk there, whether he could sit it there.
Councillor Whittaker, I hope you can hear me when I invite you the opportunity to change desks and sit down there if you so wish. Very good. Thank you. Right, okay. Right, we'll move on to item 9, shall we? We don't want any county hall shenanigans in here, so just behave. Item 9, to note the programme of council meetings for the years 2021-22. Is that to be introduced by you, or is it just an announcement? Councillor Bradley, are you proposing those dates?
Mr Mayor, personally,
Right.
but I'm more than happy to note those meetings, including the additional meeting on the 29th of June, which I'm hoping all members can attend. I know it wasn't in the diary, but we do think it's important. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so I think we can agree that. Item 10 is the review of members' allowances scheme 2021. That is you, Councillor Bradley, followed by Councillor Wilson to second.
Mr Mayor. Okay, so the proposal, the recommendations are detailed in paragraphs 2 through to 5 regarding the members' allowances scheme. It is detailed that alternate schemes were considered and not carried forward. Obviously, it also refers to the fact that we have made a few changes and they are up for review again in 12 months' time. But primarily, with a lesser number of councillors, there is a slight saving to the council of this scheme. We're going to see how the scheme works for the next 12 months, and then we'll be reviewed at that point there. It also details independent members of the remuneration panel, etc., and the method whereby members' allowances are changed and reviewed within the council. So I think, again, as a holding report pending probably more changes next year, it's I would propose recommendations made. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wilson.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Does there anyone wish to speak on these recommendations at paras 2, 3, 4 and 5? No? I'm particularly delighted at para 5, of course, as you would expect. So that's for a decision. So can we have an indication as if we support those recommendations? 2, 3, 4 and 5, please show. Anyone against? No. Okay, that's agreed. Item 11. Under urgent business previously agreed with the Mayor, pages 29 and 30, I have accepted an urgent item distributed today as it affects residents within the borough and is time constrained. The notice of motion is to be proposed by Councillor Hasina Khan and seconded by Councillor Berry. We will then debate the motion and then we will take a vote. It needs to be, you'll have to wait, Councillor Boardman. Let's get the thing on the table first. Okay, Councillor Khan. All right, Councillor Khan, just sit down a moment. Point of order. What point of order is it?
Just to let me explain, Mr Mayor.
What point of order is it?
Point of order on timings, Mr Mayor, and whether this is notice of motion is brought in line with our...
I'll let you get away with it this time, but next time you do a point of order, I want to know what point of order it is.
We brought this under the urgent business because it's time restrained, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to know what the time restraint is, so we can actually look at that. And I am very concerned that this isn't a piece of urgent business with Chorley Borough Council. This is, as we know, a Lancashire County Council piece of notice of motion aimed at County Council. It is them opening a consultation. They are not making any decisions here. So I'd just like to know what ratifies an urgent piece of business and what are the time restraints before we hear this notice of motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
What defines an urgent item of business is defined by the Mayor, and that's me, and I've defined that it's urgent. So that's the end of the matter. Councillor Hasina Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, first of all, I'd like to explain the urgency, the reason for the lateness of this notice of motion is because the impact it would have on our Chorley residents.
Councillor Khan, can I just stop you for a minute? This is really important business, and we cannot hear. I would allow and request that you sit down so that your mouth is closer to the microphone. That's more important than the protocols at this stage. Okay, go ahead.
Chorley Council requires the council leader to write to the leader and CEO of Lancashire County Council to demand that it immediately halt the recently announced consultation into the future of grant-maintained nurseries, which could see some of the county's 24 maintained nurseries closed, including Highfield and Duke Street nurseries here in Chorley. As we have not yet fully emerged from the COVID-19 pandemic and face issues of educational ability resulting from education closures and lockdowns, this council believes that such a consultation ill-timed and premature. Further, we urge Lancashire County Council ask the government to immediately confirm the extension of supplementary funding to 2022, as well as finally providing the long-term funding solution that has been repeatedly promised in the past. We here in Chorley join with many educational experts and teaching unions in highlighting the great risk of taking premature and ill-thought action on this issue, which appears to be driven by yet more central government cuts to vital public services. The consultation into the future of early years education was put on hold during the pandemic by the Department of Education. However, the consultation process is now set to restart, and Lancashire appears to be one of the first local authorities to do so. We all know that maintained nursery schools play a vitally important role in our education system, and their essential value to our most disadvantaged communities has been clearly demonstrated during the COVID-19 crisis. They have generally remained open throughout lockdown, working tirelessly to provide essential support for families in some of the most deprived areas of our borough. We urge Lancashire County Council to pause this process and ask the government to immediately confirm the extension of supplementary funding to 2022, as well as finally providing the long-term solution that has been repeatedly promised. Please support this notice of motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Julie Berry, you're down to second this notice of motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to formally second this motion and reserve the right to speak. Thank you. I'd like to defer to Councillor Cabinet Member Bev Murray to speak. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to clarify the urgency of the situation, my understanding is that governors were made aware of the consultation which started on the 10th of May to run to the 28th of May, with a response analysis planned on the 7th of June to the 18th of June. Draft reports then to be published on the 21st of June, and next steps and action implementation by the 6th of September, which does make it extremely tight. And within that timeline, I understand there is no room for any indication that will be a wider public consultation. As Asina has already said, grant-maintained nurseries have significantly higher number of children with complex needs, and we are lucky in Chorley that we have two, because we have a whole range of early years provision from private nurseries, forestry schools and preschools in our community centres. But the majority of children at Duke Street and Highfield, I understand, have been transferred in from other providers because they cannot meet the needs of these children. Duke Street Children's Centre, Duke Street Nursery is in my ward, and in that centre, they look after children. They look after 14 children with complex needs, 28 children who qualify for early years pupil premium, which is similar to the free school meals measurement, and 33 vulnerable children who have often suffered significant trauma in their early life. Yet, both Duke Street and Highfield, by being creative and flexible, have managed to balance their budgets now and for the coming years. However, the uncertainty is there because the government haven't stepped up and said what they're going to do. The lack of certainty and the fact that we're just coming out of a pandemic, I believe, is not truly reflected and will cause further problems with the consultation. You know, maintained nurseries are in a difficult position and they're uncertain. However, they continue to provide certainty and stability to some of our most vulnerable children and families in the community, and they deserve our support.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak? Sarah, Councillor Ainsworth.
Hi, it's my first time speaking. Just on a personal note, we're very lucky in Chorley that both Highfield and Duke Street Nursery are both outstanding by Ofsted. On a personal level, I've went to Duke Street Nursery in the past. On a personal level, my mum would not have been able to afford to send me to a private nursery. She relied on that service, and what we had was outstanding, and we need to support these nurseries in Chorley. Thanks.
Oh, good evening, everyone. I don't normally speak, but today I'm speaking in support of the notice of motion. Once again, an example of how local government aim to penalise the most deprived and vulnerable members of society. I represent Chorley East. It's one of the most deprived, populated and diverse wards of Chorley, and Highfield is in there. And to see Highfield close would be a massive loss to Chorley East. So just speaking in support of the notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Anyone else? Councillor Bradley.
Mr Mayor, and to echo the words of my group members, I think we are all concerned about this. Councillor Boardman's asked about the urgency of it. I would reverse that question. I would say to County Council, why now? They don't have to go to this consultation now, other areas aren't. So why are we in the first tranche? Why do we have to be the leader on this? What is pushing this? What's the rush from County Council, as Councillor Murray has laid out? We've all been busy, concerned with elections, as have the County Council. So while we've been doing that, somebody's been planning nursery closures. The first proposal for this was to only look at half a dozen in East Lancashire primarily that were really struggling financially, and to leave all the other successful nurseries out of the equation. But now they've included every nursery in Lancashire, which, as Councillor Murray highlights, destabilises those ones that have been able to balance their books, those ones that have been providing a good service. Why put them through that ringer? There is no need to do it. So why here? Why now? What's the rush? And why is it so extensive? Unless there is something more behind this. And therefore, when people are trying to say why we're doing this, the very reason this council should be asking those questions is, as I understand it, there isn't the time for us to go to another council meeting and get those answers from the county council. And to be quite blunt, there hasn't been anybody at county council to ask the answers of. The new member, the new leader, that was their portfolio. So we need to know what is going on, which is why this motion, I believe, asked me to write to the leader and chief executive to fully ask for a pause, a suspension and a cessation, and a commitment from the government to fund these properly till 2022, when, as Councillor Murray points out, they can be properly reviewed once they're back up and running properly, not using lockdown as an excuse to assess people incorrectly. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Anyone from the opposition wish to speak? Councillor Khan, you want to come back again?
I just wanted to come in and say that despite the pandemic, the promises made by Boris Johnson that no one will be left on the sidelines, we know in Chorley and in Lancashire that Boris's promises mean nothing. The schools are bursting at the seams, nurseries are closing down, and at a time when our families need support more than ever, we are now faced with broken promises. Blatant lies from Tory county councillors, but luckily we now have our Chorley councillors from our opposition, but I'm sat with them today, Councillor Rigger and Councillor Alan Collins. Councillor Rigger is one of the big chiefs up at county now, and I look at him to help bring in the much needed funding into Chorley and Lancashire. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Conn. Councillor Moore, would you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll stay seated and then everyone can hear me. I feel really it would be remiss of me not to say a few words. As a former chair of Governors at Highfield Nursery School, and for a short time Chair of Governors at Duke Street Nursery when the two governing bodies amalgamated. There are 389 maintained nursery schools, and I emphasise these are schools, not nurseries, not day centres. They are schools. 24 of them are in Lancashire, and the two outstanding nursery schools are here in Chorley. And it's not just me saying they're outstanding, it's Ofsted inspectors saying that they're outstanding. These schools have given our youngest children the best start in life, and has been emphasised by other speakers, especially those with special educational needs and various disabilities. They ensure access to the highest quality provision for families in some of the poorest parts of this borough. And make no mistake, in case there is some other agenda here, private nurseries, and they're not schools, nurseries, are not lining up to take that role to replace these schools. Never can they and never will they be able to replace nursery schools and their teachers. The only review that really is required is into the lack of clarity from government about providing the long-term funding solutions that they have promised nursery schools time and time again, and as yet are still to deliver. Now, I know that the county councillors on this side will fight this review, and I hope that the county councillors on that side will do the same. I hope they will press their new leader, the County Councillor Philippa Williamson, the new County Council leader, to think again and perhaps remind her of her previous role as Cabinet Member for children, young people in schools, when she stood in front of these nursery school heads and chairs of governors, and I was there, I was one of them, telling them how crucial, how essential they were to the lives of the children in this borough. So I urge her now, it's her time to stand up and be counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morwood. Is there anybody else wishing to speak on this item? As a big advocate of democracy, I want to just ensure that there is nobody on the Conservative group wanting to speak on this item. Councillor. I know you couldn't help yourself.
Push me into it,
I know,
Mr. Mayor.
I know, well, you know.
It's not that I don't want to speak on this item, because I think the notice of motion shouldn't be tabled tonight. I've already said that. My concern about this is that from what I've read today, and literally today, because I only received the notice of motion at 11 o'clock this morning, and having read through the various press reports which Lancashire County Council have put out over the past 18 months actually, because this consultation was announced in February 2020. The consultation was announced, and I quote Philippa Williamson, in one of her letters, because they have had concerns for a while of some of the nursery schools that are financially unviable and are not meeting the recommendations and requirements. Now, as she states, some, that's not all. Again, the most latest press release that came out clearly states, recognising the current situation with COVID-19, we've decided not to engage in debate with head teachers until mid-May, which is now. Okay. Until then, we will continue our analysis work. So by that, I would say that they've completed their analysis work. Okay. They went into the pandemic with concerns about the financial projections of some of the maintained nursery schools. Now, if the two nursery schools in Chorley are outstanding and have managed to balance their books, there is nothing to worry about. There's 24 of these schools. That's what I would state. Okay? This is an opinion. Basically, some of the 24's nurseries are overspending, and we know that. And every penny of overspend affects every other maintained school within Lancashire. That is clear. I've been a governor on several primary schools, And I can tell you now that every penny is needed in every school. So if some schools are getting it and are not financially viable, and after a review, something has to be done about that, all I can say is I really hope that Lancaster County Council look inwards and spend more on the other schools within the county, in the county. The closing statement on this press release I'm reading is, along with other councils, we have lobbied for additional resources to central government for early education. So hence why I brought forward that the notice of motion wasn't really applicable for this council, because my LCC have already put out some substantial press releases based on that. So I've spoken. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wish to speak before I give you the option of a named vote? Councillor Wilson.
There we go. We're on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am sometimes left speechless, and this evening is one of those. We spent 25 minutes trying to shoehorn in the decision on when a committee sits when it wasn't even on the agenda. We take an item about the very future of children's nursery education, and our opposition thinks it's not appropriate for us to talk about it. I find that absolutely disgusting. I find it inappropriate, and it just says everything as to why we are the largest party in this council. It says everything as to why we do run Chorley, the services in Chorley, and it says everything as to why they're in opposition and will remain in opposition for a very, very, very long time. I think it's really, really poor to try and rule this out of order, a major issue facing children in our area, and you don't even want to talk about it, let alone take action on it.
Right, okay. There's nobody else wishing to speak, so are we moving to a vote by a show of hands, or are we calling for a named vote? Name vote? Okay, we'll go for a name vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll read through the full list of councillors, and if you could indicate whether you're for or against the motion. So, Councillor Holgate?
For.
Councillor Julia Berry? Councillor Sarah Ainsworth? Councillor Aaron Beaver? Councillor Martin Boardman? Councillor Alistair Bradley? Councillor Sam Chapman? Councillor Mark Clifford? Councillor Alan Cullens? Councillor Magda Cullens? Councillor John Dalton? Councillor Karen Derbyshire? Councillor Gordon France? Councillor Margaret France? Councillor Peter Gabbett? Councillor Danny G? Councillor Tom Gray has given his apologies, so Councillor Harold Heaton? Councillor Alex Hilton? Councillor Terry Howarth? Councillor Keith Idden? Councillor Hasina Khan? Councillor Samir Khan? Councillor Zara Khan? Councillor Roy Lees? Councillor Adrian Lowe has apologised. Councillor Matthew Lynch? Councillor June Molyneux? Molyneux, apologies. Is that, sorry, is for or against? Councillor Alistair Morwood? Councillor Beverley Murray? Councillor James Nevitt? Councillor Alan Platt? Councillor Deborah Platt? Councillor A.D. Riggett. Councillor Jean Sherwood. Councillor Kim Snape. Councillor William Simmons. Councillor Christine Turner. Councillor John Walker. Councillor Jenny Whiffen. Councillor Alan Whittaker. And Councillor Peter Wilson. I'll just count the votes and then I'll let you know. Yes, Mr. Mayor. The result of the vote was 27 votes in favour of the motion and 13 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. You all heard that, so the motion has been carried, and the Chief Executive will do as is requested of him on that notice of motion. I think it's fair to say that is the end of this evening's meeting. I would just like to thank everyone for having behaved themselves. It's not at all like County Hall here. And hopefully by the next meeting there should be some supper or a drink in the Mayor's Parlour, assuming the COVID restrictions continue in the trajectory they are at the moment. So thank you all very much. And for the first time in a year, I can say have a safe journey home because you're all here. Thank you.